Hello and welcome to another video. So, wanted to take a look at an area that I've seen people ask about quite a bit times of how do you go about getting into game development? And so that's something that I want to talk about. Look at a bit of the different pathways into game development, look at some of the things that you can be doing to prepare for that, how some of that works, and also give you some guidance on how you can develop and improve your skills as part of that process of getting into game development. So, first thing you kind of need to figure out is the role that you want to have. And there are a lot. There are many roles in game development. And I'm going to run through a lot of the main ones. Different roles here. Some of them I know a reasonable amount about. Some of them I don't know too much about the pathways there. But I'll try and provide sort of some suggestions there for that. So one of the big ones, obviously, is art, and art covers a vast range of areas. We have everything from the concept art side of working out ideas for what characters and items and environments and effects and elements of the user interface, what all of those things might look like. You have people developing just specifically user interface or other 2D artwork. You have the 3D side, which the 3D side is massive. You've obviously got sort of objects in the environment, you've got characters, and even within characters, there's a lot to that. There's not just building the model itself, but there's actually rigging it, so giving it a skeleton. There's animating it. There's huge amounts of stuff to a lot of these areas. You have the environmental art design, you have effects design, there's a lot of different aspects to it. So art is a huge component. And one of the things with a lot of these fields is, depending upon the size of the team that you're working in, it might be a case that someone is wearing multiple hats, that they might be, on a small team, they might be doing multiple areas within art. Whereas on a larger team, you might have a case where people specialize in very particular areas where there is a need and a justification for having someone that focuses just on concept art and someone that focuses just on the animation side. Really depends upon the scale of the project, but in general, what you'll find is larger projects allow for more specialization. Audio is another huge area, and again has different aspects to it. We have the composition of music and soundtracks there for the game. We have the development, the engineering of sounds, so what we call sound design there for things like sound effects for items, for even user interface sound effects, footsteps, all of these different things are part of what we generally refer to as sound design. For art and audio and a lot of these areas, you have an overall person directing those, trying to ensure consistency and quality and making sure the processes are working well. You have the community management side as well, potentially. This is going to vary a little bit from game to game. On a very small game that might not have a huge amount of community involvement, this might be something that's just rolled into something another person is handling, or might be shared amongst multiple people. But suddenly on large games or games with that are having a lot of interaction there with the community, that's a really important role, because people as community managers, they are the bridge between the development side and the people playing the game. And so they need to kind of be able to speak to both groups and help translate things, help the development team understand why a particular issue might be important, and also on the other side, help the community understand why some fixes might be taking longer than they want, or why things might be set up a particular way. So involves a lot of being able to work with many different people and be able to communicate really effectively, really clearly. The design side. Again, another huge area with a lot of sub areas under that. You have things like narrative design, where people are, crafting the narrative, the story, dialogue aspects for the game. You have things like level design, so mapping out the spaces that a player is moving through. And so design in general is concerned with the player experience, and it's the player experience from hitting, play to the player actually exiting the game. Everything that the player experiences, that they thinks, that they feel, that they do, that's evoked by the game, that's the remit of folks on the design side. So you've got things also like gameplay design. So that's looking at, covers things like, it might be inventory, it might be stuff like, mini games, anything like of that, like a huge number of elements there. Folks that might focus on combat or specifically encounters. You have environmental design where, and this sort of overlaps heavily on the art side there and more sort of sits closer on the art side, but where you want to make a space feel authentic, where you want to make it feel lived in and real, and you can convey a lot with environmental design. So design, huge area. There's also a lot of infrastructure. You've got HR, office management, a lot of aspects there that are involved, and those are things that are important in game development, because without those, the people developing art and audio and design, they need that support. We need to make sure we've got tools that work and processes and things like of that, and that infrastructure side is really, really important. Marketing. And this is another one where marketing is very much a part of the development team. And you want to have really good communication between all of these disciplines, all of these roles. I've seen what happens when you don't have good communication there with marketing, and when the people above are not ensuring that communication is happening. And on one game that I worked on a very, very, very long time ago, this disconnect resulted in marketing announcing that there was going to be a particular feature in the game. And it was a feature that we had scrapped. And so because it had been announced, we ended up having to add that feature in. So it meant another large cool feature that the community had been after. We had to actually cut that, and that got delayed several months as a result. And that was, the fault there wasn't on the marketing side, on the dev team side. It was on the people sitting above that, not making sure that there was good communication happening there. And that's the thing. The two need to be working hand in hand there, so that marketing knows what kinds of things are coming down the pipeline, and so that they can communicate their needs in terms of promotional material or ways of talking about things. That's really, really important. Production side. And production is an area that is at time can be really hard to define, but is so incredibly vital. Production is both kind of the lubricant that keeps the wheels turning, and also the bolts that keep the wheels sort of where they need to be. It's a incredibly sort of challenging role, because it involves making sure that there's lots of communication happening there, making sure that the right people are talking to each other at the right points in time. So facilitating communication, making sure that people are staying on schedule, and identifying when there are things that might veer things off of schedule. Production is incredibly valuable. I've been fortunate to, on a lot of the projects I've worked on, work with extraordinary producers, and it makes all the difference in the world. It means that, as a programmer, I'm able to really just focus heavily on the programming side, because I know that big picture is being taken care of, and that there are people that I can trust you sort of steering that. And I know that if I have sort of things that I'm needing, I can flag that, and production will help make sure that those happen when they need to. So it's a little bit of a difficult role to at times describe, but it's, you know, if you enjoy keeping lots of plates spinning and trying to find solutions to, you know, complex puzzles with lots of moving pieces, which genuinely is something I really enjoy, production might be a role for you. It's a very challenging one, involves, again, a lot of communication, but so valuable in the team. Programming, an area I'm very familiar with. This is the main area I have focused on, similar to some of our larger umbrella areas like art and audio and design. There is a lot of specialization within this, again, on larger teams. That's more common. So you'll often, in a programming team, you might have some folks that are generalists, so they can work across a lot of different areas. Generalists are so valuable. I love having generalists on a team because it gives you people that you can have work on sort of any area. They can be a real huge asset, people that are generalists. You also can then specialize in particular areas. So folks might specialize, in my case, AI. You have people might focus on audio or gameplay, or physics side of things, graphics, optimization, networking, lots of different sort of sub areas there. I sort of generally would consider myself a generalist who kind of specializes in AI and gameplay side of things. So you've got a lot of different areas there. And while they're listed last, because I've listed everything alphabetically, definitely not last, and that is QA, quality assurance. QA is such an essential part of the development team. And what's involved in QA is it's not just playing the game. There's so much more to it than that. QA isn't playing the game, they are testing and analyzing and stress testing the game. They're playing it through from end to end, making sure that everything is working the way that it should do. They're also trying to go out of the box and try things that people might not necessarily, that we're not intending for them to do, but that the game provides them the tools to do that. So they'll stress test it. They'll try and find ways of breaking it. And that requires a lot of creativity, a lot of ingenuity, a lot of understanding of how the systems work, to try and break it. And the thing is, their job isn't done when it's a case of like, cool, we broke it, log bug, done. When they find a bug, their process then is, okay, they need to try and check if it reproduces, and to get the most concise reproduction case or repro case they can. And that's a huge challenge. Getting a good repro case is so challenging. On Bioshock Infinite, we had a bug that it took us 2 months to track it down, and it was one that we couldn't ship with. It was a progression blocker bug, we refer to it as. And didn't cause a crash. It was actually kind of the worst kind of one, that it just resulted in a character getting into an odd state that meant you could not progress. And we couldn't get a good reproduction case for ages. It was a very difficult one to actually figure out what was happening, because by the time we detected it was happening, the actual problem had been caused minutes earlier. And we tried lots of different things. There was a huge amount of development experience looking at this, trying different things. And then one of the QA team was just being really thorough and testing different things. They managed to get kind of the ideal scenario of they got 100% repro of it. And once they found that, it took us a minute, 2 minutes to diagnose and fix the bug. All because they had managed to track down that perfect repro case. and seen other ones there where they, doing that process, they found bugs that had actually been there for, the better part of a year to 18 months, but were quite critical bugs. And they just were really difficult to find, but they were just very diligent with testing every single aspect. So this is the thing, there's a lot of different roles here in game development. In a lot of cases, so ones like art and audio, design, programming, a portfolio is going to be a big part of that. So seeing a range of things that you're able to create. For the other ones, those are areas that I'm less familiar with, and they're a bit more difficult, I think, to give just necessarily a portfolio, but involvement with games. And I think in particular for things like, production and, the QA side and that, being able to talk about how you have approached things, how you have coordinated teams or helped with that coordination of teams. I think those are important aspects that you can be talking about there. Now, one role that isn't listed here, and I'm going to try and say this as kindly as possible, is there's not a role listed here of someone whose only job is to have ideas and just to throw out ideas. The ideas person is not a role in game development. The closest you get to that is within the design field, and sort of a creative director. But even there, creative director's job isn't throw out ideas. It's to take those ideas, to work with the team, to develop them into not just concepts, but into designs. Their job is to convey their vision of the game and to bring everyone onto the same page with that, to make sure that everyone is working together to achieve and deliver that. There's no one whose job is just to throw out ideas. That doesn't exist. So if that's something where people do at times get there and want to get into games and just want to generate ideas, cool, that's great. Ideas are cool, but designs are better because designs are actionable. An idea is the beginning of this process, but then that has to go through a lot to actually become even a design, yet let alone something that's implemented into the game. So, okay, those are the kind of roles in game development that we have. And before getting to what sort of how we can approach getting into those areas, let's talk about some common pitfalls. One of the big things is trying to make something too big too early. A lot of people want to get into game development because they have a dream game that they want to make. If you ask, probably most game developers have a dream game that they want to make. I've yet to talk to one, myself included, who has ever actually gotten to implement that. So after 20 years in the industry, I've never implemented my dream game. However, what I have done is I have built a lot of games that I am exceedingly proud of those games, and that I have very much enjoyed making. So I may not have made my dream game, but have made a lot of really, really cool things. And part of the reason I say trying to not do that at the beginning is a couple of reasons. One thing is making something really large, and this is the thing, very early on, it's difficult to estimate how long something is going to take. We're going to be terrible at that. So we're often be a case of cool, this dream game I want to make, and it's that's something that would take a team of 50 people 2 to 4 years to make. And it's not to say solo devs can't make large games over many years, but being able to sustain motivation, being able to sustain a consistent, coherent vision for something over an extended period like that of months into years is very difficult. It's why it's always easier for teams to do that, because you can be building off of each other's sort of excitement and energy and ideas and shaping the game there. When you're working sort of solo or a very, very small group, it can be very difficult. The other thing is our dream game. It's a dream that we had before we knew how to actually develop games and what was involved in it. It was the dream of a consumer of games, not a creator of games. And what you can find is that once you learn more about the creation process of games, it's a case like, actually, that would not be a good idea to make this for particular reasons. It won't always be the case, but that can be the case there. So we want to try and avoid making something too big too early. Also, recommend being very wary of diving just straight into a team. Working in a team, coordinating a team, is a skill in and of itself. And so diving straight in, it's like, cool, want to make a game. Let's get together a team of, 5, 10 people. That's a lot of people. Anything more than sort of, I'd say, 3 people is a lot, and you start to need to have folks coordinating it. That's something that often gets forgotten when people are like, cool, we're going to put together a team for this. People forget production, and they forget QA, often also forget audio, and those are really big areas. And in particular with larger teams, larger projects, those are essential areas. So diving straight into a team is something I'd be wary of doing. The other thing is, and I've seen quite a few of these recently, of people advertising for trying to put together a team, and they're not offering to pay people. It's a case of no. It's about you'll get a share of the profit at the end of it, or you're doing this bit of work for it as something that can go on your portfolio. Essentially, the obligatory thing of an old thing of working for exposure. It's nonsense. Don't do it. If when you're working for exposure is a thing that you can do once you can use exposure to pay for your rent, pay for food, electricity, and other bills. When I can do that, sure, I'll work for exposure. But at the moment, exposure don't pay the bills, so don't do it. If someone values you enough to want to have you work on the project, then you should know your own value there. And it should be a case of like, cool, well, you value what I can bring to this project, so pay me. Don't work for exposure. It's always a bad idea. The other thing that's a common pitfall is not completing a project. And this was something I think many of us are guilty of doing. I know I have so many started projects from a way back. And this is something where you learn so much from completing a project. And by completing a project, I mean actually getting to the point of releasing it. On something like itch.io or things like that. Releasing a project, you learn so much more by doing that final little step. It's really important and really valuable. And learning how to finish a project is so valuable. I'll chuck a link in the description below. This is something where I was struggling a lot with completing projects. And so what I did was I set myself a challenge of, in a year, I was going to make 12 games. But the rule I had for it was that with each game, I only had a maximum time budget of 24 hours. And I kept track of the time for it, and so that meant I had to scale down the projects. But in the end of it, I released 12 games, and I learnt so much in the process of making those games. It made it easier for me working on larger projects after that. It also helped me develop a lot of tools that speed up my development process. So super, super valuable doing like of that. Only making this one type of thing is also a bit of a pitfall. It's great to have an area that you enjoy and that you like making. That's really great to have. But what you want to avoid is only making that type of thing, because it's good to have in your portfolio a variety of areas, and there's things that you can learn from different areas that you might be working on. So I really recommend making a variety of different things. It's incredibly valuable. Other big mistake is ignoring media outside of games. Games is part of creative media, and there is a lot of other aspects of creative media out there. You have, obviously television and movies and books and music and paintings and performances. There's a huge amount of things out there, and there's so much value in them. A 3-minute piece of music can evoke powerful emotions. A painting can make us feel things just by looking at it. So there's huge amount of inspiration and value in these areas outside of games. And I think you do yourself a disservice if you're not looking at those, regardless of the role that you're in. I said, I'm primarily a programmer, but I get a lot of inspiration on that from looking at other creative media. So it's really valuable to be doing that. Similar to only making the one type of thing. Locking into only one tool or engine is a mistake. There is no one perfect right engine or tool that you should be using for stuff. Knowing a variety of tools is incredibly valuable. So really recommend having a knowledge of a range of different tools. So where can you begin? First thing is figuring out the areas you like working on and how you like to work. Getting a sense of, do you like working in teams? Do you want to be more working solo? Do you want to be working with large teams? Getting a sense of that, getting a sense of the areas you like working on. Do you enjoy programming? What area of it do you enjoy? Do you enjoy the design side? What areas of that? Figuring out that kind of stuff of where you want to be working and how you would like to work. Making really, 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 really small things so that you finish them is a good way to start to build up your skills there. Doing things like game jams. However, a big thing that I would recommend with game jams is, and this is in particular for ones where it's something like a 48-hour game jam. It's all too common that with something like that, folks will tend to crunch. So work excessive hours, they might not sleep, things like that. That's a really, really bad habit. And game jams can very easily encourage that, and I think that's problematic. In terms of with a game jam, so take something like the 48-hour global game jam. When I go into that, the team that I work with, we have an approach where, okay, first off, everyone is getting sleep every night, minimum of 8 hours. So immediately, it's no longer a 48-hour game jam, it's a 32-hour game jam. Then we want to set aside a buffer of a few hours in case things go wrong. And we want to set aside time for people having meals, people taking breaks, stuff like that. So we end up scaling that 48 hours down to, okay, we have 20 to 24 hours to work on this. And we're going to scale the design, the scope of the game down to that. And that's something I would recommend if you're working on a game jam. Don't plan as if you have that full amount of time. Scale it back. Make sure you sleep, make sure you rest. Don't crunch on it. Crunch is awful. Don't do that to yourselves. Don't let your team do that to themselves as well if you're working with a team. As mentioned, trying a range of different tools. There's a lot of different game engines out there. There's a lot of different tools for different aspects of working on games. It's good to try out a range of them and get a bit of familiarity with all of them. I use Unity and Unreal. Depending upon the time of day, I either love or hate each of them. It usually varies throughout the day, depending upon what I'm currently trying to do. There's no one where it's a case of cool, this is the perfect tool, I'll always use this. A variety is important, and the best tool is down to the team and the project that you're trying to be working on and what's going to be the most effective there. So how can you continue to improve? So one of the big things is continue making more things. That's a big aspect of it. And then starting to get feedback from others Getting feedback is scary and terrifying. Absolutely is. And that's understandable. But what you can be doing there, you can give people a bit of a framework for that feedback. So a feedback framework that used before is, people can ask clarifying questions. So those are generally yes, no, short answer ones. So they should be only a few words at most. Then you have warm feedback about the project, so things that you liked and why you liked them. Then cool feedback. What are things that you didn't like and why? And then probing questions, so longer form things of areas to consider, to think about, is sort of the aspect for probing questions. So getting feedback from others is really valuable. And looking back on your own processes and seeing how they can be improved. So it's quite common for games, you'll see something done called a post-mortem. And with that, you're looking back at how things have gone, what things have gone well, why they did, what things went poorly, why they did, and working out lessons for the future. So doing a post-mortem on projects is really, really valuable. Playing a lot of different games as well. Like, again, this goes back to the exploring different media. Make sure that you're playing a variety of games and exploring a variety of different ones to try and, it helps broaden your understanding and gives you cool inspiration and ideas often. With the postmortems, there's a lot of other postmortems out there from other developers. And they can be really valuable. You can learn from their insights. And Game Developer, which I'll put the link to this below, they have a huge amount of postmortems. I think they have ones going back nearly 20 years. So I think there's something like around 1,500 postmortems that they have. So a lot of ones there, very, very interesting to read. Different ones from different perspectives, different roles in the game, and different sizes and scales of games. So I highly recommend looking at things like that. So to wrap things up, there isn't any one single path there to being a game developer. There's multiple ways that you can get into this. There are game development courses out there. What I would say is do your research on those courses first to see exactly what they teach and look at how that lines up with the job requirements for particular roles you're interested in, because they don't always line up. And get a sense of what the quality is going to be of the education there. They can be really valuable. Studying something can really help with your communication skills and things like that. But a game development degree isn't the only way into the industry by any means. I never studied game development. My degree was in aerospace engineering. But it means I come in with a different perspective. And that's really valuable in games as well, having different perspectives there in the project. So there's no one single path. They all do begin, though, with trying to figure out where you want to be, at least to start with. Where you begin isn't necessarily where you might stay. Like, I started out programming and primarily AI programming, and while that's still something that I do a lot of, I also, on particular other projects, do a lot of the design side. I do at times, basic 3D modeling and things like that. I do sound design and composition. So there's a lot of areas there that I touch on outside of the core area that I work on. So you don't have to stay in one particular area. The big thing is always starting small with the projects and finishing those projects. You learn so much from finishing things, and I can't emphasize that enough. Making small things that you complete is really valuable and really important. And knowing your value. Don't let a place, make you think that you should be working for exposure or things like that. Know the value. If a place is wanting you to be working on the project, they see value in you, so make sure you see value in yourself, because you do have value there, and don't let places exploit that. There's all too many ones where, startups or that potentially, where I've seen ones they're trying to put together a huge team and they're not paying anyone. So really, avoid things like of that. Avoid places that are going to want you to crunch, or treat crunch as just an inevitable part of game development. It isn't. It doesn't have to be. I've worked on plenty of projects and at places where crunch is not just a thing that doesn't happen, but a thing that is actively avoided, through proper planning and through a commitment to the well-being of people. So knowing your value is really, really important there. So that's my general guidance on getting into the game development field. Now, if there's particular questions you've got that I might not have covered, chuck those in a comment below. If there's other areas you'd like me to explore in this field, mention that in a comment also. I have put a couple of links in the description to things like the game developer postmortems, and in particular to the article I wrote about my processes there with developing all of the small games. So check out those. If you found the video interesting and helpful, chuck in a like and subscribe. It really helps out. It's really appreciated. If you're trying to track down other videos, I have a searchable video archive, which there is a link to that in the description below. And if you're looking for other ways to support the channel, then I do have a Patreon, and there is a link to that in the description also. But until next time,